Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry I started scrolling through my presentation right in the middle of the introduction, but thank you for welcoming me. Thank you to John and to the League. Thank you, Mayor Reynolds. I don't know if he already left, but it's a little bit, just out of the blue, a little bit emotional for me. The last time I was in Bethlehem was in 1972, when my dad was running for Vice President of the United States with George McGovern. It's a long time ago. Most of you were not even alive, I know that. We came here. I remember being on the campaign plane, 13 years old, and coming to Bethlehem, and coming to Wheeling, and coming to many of the factories here, because they represented the best of America, and because they were good Democratic strongholds. And just listening to Mayor Reynolds, it strikes me that I'm back here. We have the shadow of the plants around us, but we still have the best of America here. We still have the best of innovation and creativity. We still have the best of hard work and determination. We still have the best of average Americans doing their thing to build communities where people feel included and belong and grow and welcome everyone. So it's been a long time, but I'm glad to be back. I'm not running for any. If I were running for something, I'd come back. But I'm not running for election. In some ways, my presentation today and my presence here today is really about not running for election, but running for connection. And in some ways, I think that's the biggest challenge we face right now as a country. I'm going to talk a little bit about this Dignity Index. I'm going to ask you to join me in welcoming. It's really important for us to be with you, our little team, but we've got a lot of us here, and I want to thank them all for coming and ask them to stand. Ellen Barry's here, Ronnie Polineski's here, Keith Matheny, Tammy Pfeiffer, Preston Brightwell, from Texas, from Utah, from Philadelphia, have come here because of the importance, we think, of this audience for meeting the challenge of our time. So it's not really, I just don't want you to miss the chance. I know I'm in a room of political leaders, and the last thing politicians like to do is listen to other people speak. They'd much prefer to be doing the speaking themselves. So I'm mindful of that, and I'm going to try to make this as interactive as I can. The mayor mentioned that I've spent the last 25 years or so in the Special Olympics movement. And some of you may know the Special Olympics movement. This is a scene from one of the Special Olympics World Games. And in the upper left-hand corner, I want to invite you to gather around this oath. Have any of you ever been to a Special Olympics event or know anyone? Some hands are raised. You might remember that at the beginning of every special, and there's 100,000 games a year in this movement around the world, local games in Bethlehem, in all of your towns, right? At the beginning of every single event, the athletes say the same words, whether they're in China or in Bethlehem, Africa, Latin America, Europe, Middle East, you name it. They say, "Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt." Brave in the attempt. And so as we start, I'm going to ask you to call to mind a moment, something in your life right now, where your bravery is being called upon. Some challenge, could be at home, could be at work, could be within, could be in your family, and where you know you're going to have to be brave to take it on. I'm going to give you a second just to think about that, because it's not maybe it doesn't come to mind quickly, but I think if you allow yourself a little bit of a moment to breathe and imagine those athletes who go to the starting line with so much said against them and say those words, "Let me be brave in the attempt." Maybe it will help you call to mind some moment where you need to go to your starting line with a little bit of bravery, a little bit of risk, but a little bit of strength. We're going to return to that in just a minute. This scene has been very powerful for me as a guide. It's powerful because it involves a story. Down on the field, this is at Yale Bowl, another small town, not in Pennsylvania, in New Haven, Connecticut. The old Yale Bowl was full of about 80,000 people, and down on the field you have about 6,000 people with intellectual challenges from all over the world, developing world, Europe, Asia, Latin America, all these different places. Down on the field, they've all got single-use cameras. They're made by Kodak and donated. You remember those? Anybody old enough to remember a camera. But this was also the first games that a seated president attended. Bill Clinton came in on Marine One, landed next door to the old Yale Bowl, and came into the stadium. They wouldn't let him down on the field for security reasons because the stadium is very porous and in countless ways. Anyway, he's at the top of the stadium. And as he's speaking, you can see his image on the Jumbotron there. The athletes are down on the field, and one of the professional photographers noticed a bunch of athletes trying to get a picture of the president who was way at the top of the stadium. He took a closer look, and all 10 or 11 of the athletes had the cameras up, and they all had the cameras backwards. The lens was pointing at their noses, and they were holding the cameras, and the photographer realized they'd never used a camera before, so went over to help them and said, "You're trying to get a picture of the president, you gotta turn the camera around." And one of the athletes said, "Oh, thank you. But you know, if you look through the viewfinder backwards, it works like binoculars, and you can see the president perfectly clearly." I want to start with the lesson these athletes have taught me. We often get each other wrong. You know, we judge books by the cover. We jump to conclusions. The photographer wasn't a bad guy. The Democrats who don't like you Republicans and the Republicans who don't like you Democrats, they're not necessarily bad people, but they may be jumping to conclusions. They may be judging you, and you may be judging them. And it may be that the bravery we need now as a country is the bravery not to judge books by their cover. The risk it will take each and every one of us to try to transcend the cancer, the virus of our time, which is the contempt and hatred we seem to have normalized as a way of interacting. I take inspiration from those athletes, and it's led me to this question the last 4 years. I think of the Special Olympics athletes as some of the greatest teachers of my life. But what if their lesson is the lesson our country needs? What if actually we're looking at MSNBC and Fox to figure out what to do next, or we're looking to the universities of America, the scholars, the thought leaders, the religious leaders, the Nobel Prize winners? They're going to tell us what to do. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe this movement, the Special Olympics movement, I thought to myself, that's predicated on one single premise. It's in that middle line there. Everyone deserves dignity. It's one giant grassroots movement to remind you, whether you've been once, never before, or whether you've been 100 times, to remind you when you get there, when you get to the track, if you sit down with your coffee to watch a 100-meter race with 6 kids with Down syndrome, the hopeful message that you are taking away is everybody deserves dignity. And if they run that race in 20 seconds, they're fast, and if they run that race in a minute and 20 seconds, they're fast, if they gave you their best. Now, maybe that's a lesson we could learn. So the challenge we've been facing is, how do we teach that lesson in our country? Not just talk about it, but give people experiences of it, challenge them to think differently, turn the lens around. Here's the premise we bring you. There is a new issue in our country. It is not investment, it is not infrastructure, it is not immigration, it is not marginal tax rates, it is not education policy, it is contempt. It is not an issue related to other issues, it is an issue in and of itself. The way in which we treat each other, this is Arthur Brooks calling out the idea of an outrage industrial complex that is incentivized to make you hate other people. Don't take it from me, take it from scholars. Here's Matt Taibbi and again Arthur Brooks. The goal of the media enterprise that so many of us are addicted to, and I use the word deliberately, no offense taken, it's not an accusation, it's a fact. We're driven to go to these outlets that are trying systematically to pry families apart. That's the business model. We're the consumers. The more we go back, the more incentive the producers have to create the kind of content that will sell anger and feed audiences what they want to hear that makes you hate other people. Now, again, this is not accusatory, it's just an awakening, at least it was to me, that the fact that we're so divided is not an accident. I was talking about this a couple years ago to Marty Barron. He was at the time the editor of the Washington Post, and I said, we're going to try to make that whole system turn over. He says, good luck, it's $1 trillion business. How much do you have? The algorithm, cable news, radio, and I'm sorry to say, all of us who've been involved in politics are all linked, where the incentives are you get more famous, you raise more money, and you get more power the more you push contempt. So I say to Marty Barron, we have almost no money, and that's our strength. Because all we can do is invite Americans to join us in a movement, not based on how much you get paid or how much you get rewarded outside, but just based on the concept that we have to end this, otherwise our country's at stake. So it's not just hatred either. Okay, now people will say we have more violence in our cities, we have violence in our politics. Maybe some of you in your roles have had violence in your municipal meetings, in your school board meeters. You've seen it on television. My colleague Tammy Pfeiffer, the mayor, was just assaulted. Was that 10 days ago at a public gathering? Small towns are not immune from this. It's not an accident when you hate all day long and you speak that way that people become violent. It's a direct outcome. So the more you want to be able to say, yeah, but those people really, and then you start to fill in the blank with hateful and contemptuous language, the more you say that, we just have to own that that contributes to violence. You may say, I'm okay with it. I hope you don't, but you might. But we have to own that that's a direct correlation. It's not an accident. There's also a direct correlation to how, if you're talking to your school teachers, your superintendents, your mental health folks, your healthcare people, they're going to tell you we have more loneliness in our country than we've ever measured. We have more mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, despair. Second leading killer, I think it is, of adult men is addiction-related diseases. These are the so-called diseases of despair. What's the relation? You say, wait a second. What's the relationship between that and political contempt? Direct, right? If I'm afraid of you, what am I most likely to do? Withdraw. And the more I am afraid of speaking, engaging, sharing who I really am, the more lonely I become, the more despairing I become about the future. All this, right? All the stuff, you guys have all seen this 100 times, but it's just worth remembering, even now, that almost a quarter of us say it might be time to take up arms. No accident. The secession data, 30% of Americans want their state to secede. I know this is a purple state, but still. These things have gotten to the breaking point I don't have to tell you this, all you have to do is watch last night's news or the night before, where the most important legislative body, arguably in the world, I'm not saying this is a Republican or a Democrat, is falling apart in front of our eyes. Dissembling over contempt. This is the most discouraging one, is a little kid on that campaign bus driving into Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, whatever that was, 50 years ago almost. It would never have occurred to me that anyone in politics or anyone in the audience would have said, this country can't solve its problems. Today, almost 60% of us say that we're afraid that the country we can't solve our own problems. That is about as un-American in my lifetime. That's about as un-American an idea as you could get, no matter how bad or how dark or how difficult our periods of history have been. You would have been hard-pressed, this is the worst data ever measured by Gallup, hard-pressed to find Americans, even those who are feeling the boot of oppression and segregation and discrimination, even in those times. And those times have been long, as we know. People still thought somehow this country will get to the right spot. Somehow we'll redeem the promissory note of freedom. Not now. So enough about the negative stuff. We have a very straightforward message here that there's a solution to the contempt problem. The The solution is dignity. This is from Donna Hicks, and the lower quote here is from the spiritual leader Richard Rohr, Franciscan, who is challenging us to recognize that Donna's work has been in South Africa, post-apartheid South Africa, Northern Ireland, post-Troubles Northern Ireland, bringing people together, sometimes people where on one side you're responsible for having killed my family member, or on the other side I'm responsible for having done great harm to yours. Sitting across the table, how do you heal when you've got this kind of contempt? Donna's conclusion was simple. You have to treat other people with dignity, no matter what they did. It is only dignity that can allow you to heal from the deepest and most painful divides. So our premise here is that we talk about divisiveness. It's not caused by difference of opinion. Most of us say, well, I hate those people because they think. That's not the reason. That's not why we have polarization. The reason we have polarization is because you said, I hate these people, not because of what they think. Actually, and I'm sure you guys all have this data, we mostly agree on more things than the More in Common team has done this perception gap. Republicans and Democrats on the big issues, even on the most divisive issues, there's massive agreement in this country. It's not that we disagree, and even where we do disagree, disagreement's not the problem. Ask any husband and wife. I mean, ask your teenage child. I mean, if you think disagreement is the end of the world, you're doomed. Disagreement's not the problem. It's reaching from disagreement to contempt that's the problem. So our premise here is that. Now, I'm a great fan of Desmond Tutu, and I got to hear him once, and the question came from the audience, isn't it clear, Archbishop, that evil is more powerful than good? People are probably hearing this going, yeah, but contempt's been around forever. It's part of who we are, right? And it's easy to sell. Yes, true, he answered. No, but he said, evil is not more powerful than good, but it is better organized. So the question in front of us collectively is, can we organize a counterforce for the contempt industrial complex? Are there grass tops or grassroots leaders who would take a chance and be brave, as the Special Olympics athletes are, brave in organizing a counterforce that would make the contempt backfire? So here's where we landed. It's very difficult to talk about all this stuff in generalities. It kind of gets you nowhere. You walk out of here and yeah, that was all nice. Yeah, dignity, contempt. Yeah, I heard that all before. It's a good idea. But as many politicians have said to me, it's all fine and well to say it, but you don't get rewarded for treating people with contempt. You've got your civility campaign here, but who gets rewarded for that? You get rewarded for a snarky post where you really cut the other person down. And you get lots of likes, and you get contributions, and you get, So Emmanuel Cleaver said it, you all say you want politics and media to be more civil. Well, why don't you measure it? Nobody, you measure everything else we do. You measure our carbon footprint, our voting right, everything, our fundraising, but you don't measure that. So we thought, here's our opening. Let's build an index to score speech. Score not what you say, but how you characterize your opponent. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but I'm going to leave this up for a second so you can get a little bit of a sense of what we're bringing to you. This is the Dignity Index. And what I'd like you to do now is just think of how you characterize the other party. Just make a sentence in your mind. Republicans are, or Democrats are, or if you like, independents are. Whoever's not you. Or think how you characterize Biden or Trump, depending on which side you're on, or whoever you really don't agree with. And locate yourself on the index. Are you a 1? They're not even human. Are you a 2? They're evil, they're going to ruin our country. Are you a 3? We're the good people. They're the bad people. Most people that this is all fresh, by the way, so we look for feedback on this as we go along. Most people will, what do you think? Where do you think most people locate themselves when they talk about the other party? Just 3, 4, pretty good. Where do you think? Out loud, where do you think most people are? 4? 2? 5? Most people, I think, if they're honest, I'm not saying you're not honest, most people are a 2 or a 3. Most Democrats, if you ask them about Donald Trump, I mean, I'm not, again, no picking sides here, they will locate 2. Most, not all, most. Most people that support the former president would locate Democrats as about a 2. Not all, but a lot. This index is designed to awaken us to how this works. So let me give you an example. Here's a 1. This is where you go from violent words to violent actions. It's our moral duty to destroy them. Imagine that kind of language. Maybe you can think of something. Here's a couple of examples. Here's Heinrich Himmler from the Holocaust. Here's Leon Mugesera from the Rwandan genocide. Wipe them out. Wipe out this scum. 1 is a complete collapse of humanity and a devolution into some form of violence or even genocide. Now, if you listen to our rhetoric in our politics, you will hear one language. You'll hear one language. Slit their throats, destroy them. You'll hear one language. Let's just look. I'm not going to go through all these so you don't get too bored. And just so you know I'm not being partisan here, here's a 3. Here's then Senator Clinton, I guess, when she was running for president, talking about the basket of deplorables. They're racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. They're irredeemable. They're not America. I'm not judging Mrs. Clinton, her politics, her background, her career. I'm just saying this scores a 3. This is a little bit higher than a 2, but not much. Not much. Not much. Right? If you have people in your, I'm not sure, was this, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Let's move up. Here's a 6. Here's John McCain on the floor of the Senate. We don't have to spend too much time on it. But he closes his talk here with, at the times that I was involved in even the most modest way with working out a bipartisan response to a national problem, they're the proudest moments of my career. Now you're starting to hear the language of reciprocity, not just tolerance, but engagement. It starts to move up the ladder, the higher and the higher scores. And then we'll just do one more. Here's Desmond Tutu. Maybe Preston, can I call on you to read this out loud? Because I think it's so beautiful and I can't read it without choking up. So people say, well, an 8, that's some kind of saint. No, actually, it's each of us. We each have this in us. We've each looked across a table at someone who's done something and seen, wow. But still, nonetheless, notwithstanding, what a beautiful human being. There is no rule, and there is no necessary path that says you have to use 2 and 3 language to address people you disagree with. But Bishop Tutu's not sitting here saying, these acts are acceptable. He's not agreeing. He's just saying, I see in you, my brother, my sister, a part of me. And no matter how divided we may be, I will treat you that way. He's not saying if you're pro-choice or you're pro-life, you should agree. He's just saying maybe you should listen long enough and look long enough to see in the other person a depth of humanity that's similar to your own. So what does this index have to do? We could hand these out. We've got a bunch of these for you that you can look at yourselves. But let me just tell you why this is politically relevant. So we piloted this last year in Utah during the elections. We graded the 4 congressional races and the Senate race in real time during the debates. We graded fundraisers, we graded social media posts, we graded the debates when the candidates would have the debate, and we released the scores. Here are our official graders. We spent about 2 months training people so we could get the partisanship out of it, so that if you were a Democrat, you wouldn't automatically give Hillary a pass, or if you were a Republican, you wouldn't automatically give McCain a pass, or whoever it was that you were grading. So the first question we were asking is, can we make this nonpartisan? Can we make it objective? Can you actually score someone objectively? And the answer to that is, I'm happy to report, yes, you can. We can train people. These were our initial trainees, undergraduates and graduate students. You may recognize in the upper left-hand corner of the picture Preston Brightwell, who's now joined us full-time as a graduate student at the University of Utah. They were trained during the course of the summer. They scored the speeches. And so you say, well, does anybody care? Here's the coverage we got in 3 weeks in Utah. All this is clickable, as you can see, but it's all the kind of coverage that says it's local media, local news, drive time radio, Sunday morning local PBS shows, all talking about the question of whether Mike Lee or Evan McMullin or this person or that person used more contempt or more dignity in their speech. All of a sudden, the issue is engaged. You follow what I'm saying? We're getting to the issue, not the outcome of the issue or the apparent issue, but to the issue itself. Politico did this beautiful piece. I would strongly recommend, if you have time, a beautiful piece on our colleague Tammy Pfeiffer, who waved Tammy, standing in the back, and her efforts to share this index with Republican audiences. I'm not outing her by saying that's her party of choice right now. But this is the story in Politico of how difficult it is for people to see themselves as perpetrators of contempt. Bulwark did a piece, the Dallas Morning News did a piece after the State of the Union when the president was heckled. The reason I bring these up is because you're thinking to yourself, is there any attention here? Like, would we get any traction if we use this at the school board or in the city council meetings or in my leadership team? Would anybody care? The answer is yes, we can actually get attention for this. We can get this to be raised up as an issue people pay attention to. Here's the 3 things we learned. First of all, what we call the electrifying effect. People do care. When you awaken them, as my colleague Tom Rochard says, we're using the oldest known tool for changing human behavior, conscience. Because when you see yourself as one notch above Heinrich Himmler, most of us think to ourselves, I want to do better. You don't have to have me tell you. It doesn't need to be your Sunday school teacher. It doesn't need to be your mayor. It doesn't need to be your school's teacher, your superintendent. It can just be you. This has an electrifying effect to awaken conscience. The mirror effect. Most people we thought would use it to judge the other side. Mostly what they use it for is themselves. Mostly what we heard was, I want to talk to my boyfriend, I want to talk to my mom, I want to talk to my professor, again, I want to take down a social media post, I want to bring my scores up. And the final thing, which I think is so important here in Bethlehem and here in this state, is it reminds citizens that they can do something. How many times have you heard, there's nothing we can do about it? The problems are too big. Corporations, politics, it's all, I'm powerless, I have no options. Here we have, this is something you can do. Here's something you can do. And the young people in particular, Preston and his colleagues, were like, at least finally now I've got some action I can take when it's unsafe to ask a question in class. Maybe I could bring the dignity index to my class and make it clear that I should be able to ask a question. I'll treat you with dignity if you treat me with dignity. I'm not going to spend time on these, but let's see if I can get this. So our colleague here, Keith Matheny, master classroom teacher and football coach and many, many other things, has helped us think about, well, what are the skills? Let's say someone says there are 3. And again, this is not you are a 3, but you may have used 3 language yesterday with your husband or your sister-in-law or your nephew or whoever it is. So when you use the 3 language, you may be asking yourself, or when you're next talking to that person, you may be asking yourself, how do I bring my game up? Like, how do I do that? You want me to treat the person with dignity, how do I do it? So here are some, these are our first cut at the skills that might be useful to you, because this is leading toward an ask. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but the first is open yourself up at the beginning. Be curious, not furious. An attitude of curiosity enables you to have at least the chance to do number 2, which is to listen, to hear, not just to fight, not just to respond, not just to challenge. I'm not listening to you just to catch you. I'm not listening just to remind you that your facts are lousy. I'm not listening just to awaken you to the fact that your point of view has been disproven 400 times by science or policy or whatever. I'm actually listening to hear, right? Actually trying to understand who you are. Before you can debate, regulate. A lot of times I find myself now in this work in conversations with colleagues, and I'll be like, it's just a difference of opinion. Should we pass out the cards in the middle, or should we pass out the cards at the end? I think the middle. No, I think the end. No, sometimes I just go. One of the most powerful tools for enhancing dignity, both for yourself and for others, is the capacity to breathe. So we encourage you to think about that. Maybe the most important thing in politics is to challenge ideas, not people. Challenge policies, challenge facts, challenge outcomes. Don't challenge people. Don't say, Mayor, you're a fool. Say, I think your facts are incorrect. I think the outcomes that your policy has produced are incorrect. I think the relationship between what you're saying will work and the outcomes you're suggesting isn't there. There's no correlation, all that. But I don't have to say, and you're a damn fool. Or you're an idiot, or you're oblivious, or you're blind to the facts. You don't have to use ad hominem language to actually solve a problem. Sometimes I think we do. Acknowledge knowledge. I'll just leave that to you to understand and build up rather than tear down. When you find something in the person you disagree with, recognize it. Tammy, the point you made today about this not being a sequence, I understand it. I think it's actually a good point. Now, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can build it up first, right? Goes a long way. What does this look like? Here's a very sophisticated example of what this might look like if it's practiced. Now, let's see if I can make. Oops. There's a video there which we may. Oh, yeah, there we go. Watch closely if it works. Seems to be there, but it's not working. Okay. That's one of my favorite videos, but you're going to have to get it some other time. Let me start the conversation with, here's our pitch. This is a new organization. We have a new set of ideas. We're looking for early adopters. This state is an extraordinary importance, we think, not just to people that live in it, but to the country. It's a state in which both parties have flourished. It's a state of cities and rural communities. It's a big state. It's an industrial state. It's an agricultural state. It's a technology state. You got a lot of things in this that are the microcosm of the country. If we could do in Pennsylvania, we could do it anywhere. So we're here because we're asking you to help us take the challenge. What would it look like to build dignity communities? What would it look like for Bethlehem to be a dignity community? And here's our starting place for ideas. First, I don't know if the mayor's still here. Is the mayor still here or yet to go? Yet to go. Other mayors are here. First, promote the index. First things first. Post the index on your social media. Just put it up. Just literally share the index. We have superintendents, whenever we make this kind of a presentation, superintendents call us and say, could we get something we could teach the kids? I was at the University of Pennsylvania yesterday. We'd like to use this on campus because we have divisiveness on campus and it's hard to have free speech on campus. This is not a constraint of free speech, remember. This is actually enables free speech. The biggest obstacle to free speech is contempt. Most of us have not said something, not because the law told us we couldn't, but because we were afraid of the reaction we'd get. Almost everybody in our country has had that experience recently. So this is a way for your communities, simply by sharing the index itself, not judging people, just evaluating speech. Second, record a dignity date. You're a Democrat, leader of the Republican City Council, whatever it is, school board. Sit down. You can do it with an iPhone. You can just record for a minute or two that you want to treat each other with dignity. You could each read the pledge, which is on these cards. You could pull it down off the thing. Seeing people from different parties treating each other with dignity is in and of itself a catalyst for people to feel safe treating other people with dignity. When they see the mayor, who's angry and furious all the time, they think to themselves, that's what I should be too. And contempt is nothing more than a failure of imagination. The dignity date is the flourishing of imagination. What's possible if we listen? So we'd encourage you, Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah and the current chair of the NGA, has invited governors all over the country to record these messages. Why not join them? Not hard. You don't have to get clearance from anybody. Post a dignity date. Dignity pickup lines. They're on the back of your card, the ones I just shared. When you're in trouble or when you're having a debate, maybe bring up with the opposite party, trying to acknowledge knowledge, trying to be curious, not furious, and so on. Score yourself. Governor Cox has done this. He admitted when he was at the NGA meeting with the governors from all over the country, hey, last week I fell short. I lost my temper and I was a 3. Disarmingly powerful. Disarmingly powerful for someone to say, I didn't meet my own standards, I'm going to do better. This is what I did, this is how I did it, I'm going to do better. It actually is a sign of enormous strength. People say, oh, I'm going to get attacked for that. I look weak. Opposite. It's the opposite. You look like a rock star. So try these, try scoring yourself. Share an example of someone, like if you see someone on the floor, or if you see someone, a teacher in your school district, or a firefighter, or a police officer who treats someone with dignity at the time of an arrest, or in a 3rd grade classroom, or at the side of a burning building, and you see that, post it. I'm inspired by firefighter Smith, who said, write it in there, a 7 on the dignity index. Go for it. I'm proud of you. I'm proud to live in the same city you're in. And then we're exploring measurement. You get measured for everything. We're looking at polling. Could you do a little survey of Bethlehem or any of the other cities here in the state, and figure out what the baseline is? Where are you today? 5 questions. Do you feel that in this city it's safe to disagree? Do you feel in this city that people treat each other with dignity? Do you feel that there are role models of dignity in this? And see where you are. Get a score. Announce it. We're going to go up. Challenge people. Challenge the fire chief, the police chief, the superintendent of schools, the municipal services departments to join you. Let's raise our score. The neighboring city has a better score than us. Let's move up. So these are our thoughts, and I'm going to pause here. I'm not sure how we are for time. Yeah, we have a little bit. And I just want to see if any of this is resonating, and maybe we've got about 10 minutes for questions, conversation. Our hope is that you're looking at this and thinking, yes, yes, no. No, I'm not going to do that, but yes. We'd love to hear the no's and the yeses. What sounds like it might work, practically speaking. We don't need to rehash the theory, because we kind of, in some ways, all know that at an abstract level, we got a problem. Our question is, does any of this make sense as a practical solution to the problem? What do you think? Yes. But I know how to try to organize and invite other people to join me and to join others in doing something different, and that's what we're about here. I don't know if others have thoughts on that, because that's obviously a big question. Other responses. How do you handle your local news when you feel like the news opinion line has been breached and you're being covered with anger and contempt and sort of humiliation, all that stuff? I don't know. What are your solutions?
I think you're going to see a little bit of strength in public media, nonprofits.
Yeah.
Opportunity out there for some of those outlets.
Such a good point.
Locally. And I think that's something you've got to acknowledge and encourage. And I would recommend that everybody in the room try to support it and promote it. Because I think it sort of is back at the beginning.
Yeah.
Before all the.
Can everybody hear this? Encouraging public media. I got a call yesterday from someone in PBS and CPB saying, we want to find a way to partner with you. We are the future of media. And I was like, boring, PBS and all that stuff? He says, no, wait a second. People are looking for local reporting, we got it. People are looking for a networked approach, we have it. People are looking for thoughtful coverage of news, we have it. 2 million people watch PBS NewsHour, which is more than the 3 cable news hours combined, most nights. I didn't know that. So I think you're right. I think there's something in the future of this combination of corporate and philanthropic and public interest media, which is the PBS network, so to speak, that might survive the collapse of some of the big guys who are profiting from the current business model. I think it's really smart, yeah.
Just curious, how do we embrace such a philosophical concept for implementation when we've been vilified because there's a lack of civics education and the public almost literally has no idea what government does? So now government is the problem because nobody knows what government even is. Shouldn't we re-educate at a civic level versus engaging in more, lack of a better term, esoteric philosophical ideas? Sorry.
Esoteric, that's cuts to the core. I know what you mean. No, I know exactly what you mean. I know it. No, I don't take any offense. I know exactly what you mean. I would say it's both and, honestly. That would be my answer. Having taught high school social studies for a little bit, I agree with you that many kids graduate from high school not knowing there are 3 branches of government, not knowing that states and locals and federal governments operate at different levels, not understanding the judiciary, all that, the stuff that's core, not understanding the responsibilities of a state or local government to provide services and so on. It's very difficult to lead where people don't understand what even the job description, not to mention the person occupying it. So we do need a renewal and a strengthening of civics education, and we do need a strengthening of civic infrastructure as a culture. Our civic clubs, I'm sure you have Rotary clubs and Lions clubs in your neighborhood. These are important vehicles. They're struggling too, but they're doing okay, some of them. Keeping people together as convening opportunities and networking opportunities and service. The Lions clubs, the slogan is, we serve, right? It's a very civically oriented institution. So I would just say I can't disagree that we need to do that, but I don't think, the only point I would make is I don't think, and I'm not trying to quibble here, but this is designed to be very practical. It's a skill builder, not an idea builder, we hope. So that's what we're trying to get to. So you don't just walk out thinking, oh, I should be a person of dignity. You actually walk out saying, I was a 6, or I was a 3, or I was a 4, or my wife is a 4, or a 6, or an 8, whatever it is. So we're trying to convert it into a skill. And Keith, before we close, I'm going to ask you to come up here and teach a skill in a second. So I know you're ready. Yes. Yes, sir. Super good question. I'll tell you how we've met them so far. They're asking us to come present because their congregations are so divided by contempt. You know, it's fascinating. You know, I come from the Catholic tradition. I mean, it makes the Republican-Democrat divide look like, you know, a sandlot. I mean, the amount of contempt and hatred within the religious community. So I think the first consumer feedback we've gotten from faith-based institutions is come train our people, come train our pastors, our ministers, our leaders, everybody, you know, our rabbis, whatever, imams and so on. But in a way, you're not far off. We are trying to remind our country that there is a civic religion, if you can call it that, which this country has thought about for a long time. The civic religion believes that everyone's equal, that citizens can solve and should try to solve with compassion the problems that are in communities, that we have a sort of a faith in the ideal of liberty and justice for all, that those things have been lost in some sense as values or as spiritual principles or as faith-based admonitions to the culture is part of the problem. The decline in religious institutions is, I think, I'm not sure it's the cause of the problem, but it's certainly a symptom of the increase in contempt and hostility, because there's no mediating institution that would allow you to say, I love my enemies, how do I do that this Sunday? You know, I got to grapple with that, I got to talk to my kids about it, okay. Now, if you're not going anymore, you're not hearing it. So in some ways, I think we're trying to remind people that what religious institutions have traditionally taught is necessary. And in the other way, we're trying to help religious institutions mediate the conflicts within them, in a sense, both. One more comment? Yeah.
But let me suggest this, because I think along those lines that, you know, one of the things as elected officials and leaders, one of the responsibilities that we have is not only to deal with the hard stuff, the infrastructure and those things, but, you know, part of what's changed, and particularly in the Commonwealth, is the sense of community. I think it would be very interesting to take a look, and there are instruments out there that measure scores of how strong a community is. It would be interesting to see how those community scores, a strong community, compares to your scale. Yeah. You know, if those two are mentioned.
Do you have a score that you look at in your?
I've seen them. I mean, you know, I think it's something we all can benefit from, but I think it would be very interesting to see if those things move parallel. I would tend to believe that those places with stronger communities tend to be a little more on the positive side of that scale. I think
I'm sure that's true. You know, go all the way back to the Special Olympics athletes. You know, you go to a Special Olympics event where civic structure, where almost a faith-based conviction that we should help each other is, you know, you don't know who's a Republican or a Democrat. You don't know it's not even, it wouldn't even occur to you to ask. Why would you care? You're serving water to somebody running 100, you know? It's, so I agree with you. It would be fascinating if the state were to, I mean, here I am speaking way out of school, if you were to try to adopt some kind of shared measure. We don't have one, so I'm not pitching one, but some kind of shared measure that municipalities could all use together and try to grow around or develop together. I don't know, you know, what that might look like, but it would be a unique effort of a single state to bring cities and towns together around a trajectory that measures and challenges. We'd be happy to help think about that. We don't have a product there to manage. Keith, before we stop, I want to let Keith teach one 2-minute lesson on how we raise our dignity game. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like everybody to fold their arms across their chest. Everybody fold their arms across their chest. Everybody good? Fold your arms across your chest. Okay, now, I'd like you to look at which arm is on top. And I'd like you to unfold your arms and put the other arm on top. There's some chuckles already. What's wrong? Now what I'd like you to do is interlace your fingers, please. And now I'd like you to look at which finger is on top. I'd like you to uninterlock your fingers and interlock your fingers with the other finger on top. So what happens is we get stuck in these patterns. We're like, oh, this is uncomfortable to have this arm on top. I can't do it that way. I can't interlace my fingers that way. But the truth isn't that we can't do it, it's that we can't do it yet, that we haven't practiced it. And a lot of times when we look at situations in some new paradigm, like the one that we're talking about today, we can't have politics with dignity. Not yet. Not yet. It's just about learning to practice different skills. And as we practice those skills more repetitively, then neurons that fire together wire together. And now suddenly that new practice becomes a pattern. And it becomes our natural pattern in the way we engage with others. So when you think to yourself, this can't be possible, say to yourself, not yet. But with practice, we got it.
Thank you, Keith.
There's my 2 minutes.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Let me, it's perfect. Let me close by just inviting you to remember where we started. Was there a moment you realized you needed to be brave? And I'm just going to leave you with a quote from one of our mentors in this space, Greg Boyle, who works out in South Central LA with gangs. If part of your challenge, if something you need to be brave with involves trying to change someone else, trying to move somebody, trying to engage someone, my guess is, if you're like me, you hadn't thought of a strategy of trying to do that by introducing them to their own goodness. But I offer this to you with a generosity of spirit and a gratitude for having had the moments here together, to say I hope this is the beginning, and not just the beginning, but a step along the path of bringing our country to a place where everybody feels that dignity is our common language. Thank you all very much.